My name is Harmony Mendoza, meteorologist at WBTM 13 in Birmingham. I've been in Birmingham for 11 or 12 years, but I came from Columbus, Georgia. That's where my weather journey began, professional weather career. My thirst for weather was actually when I was about 15 years old. We went on a field trip and we went to a television station. I remember the television station in Tampa, Florida. That's where I'm from. It was called ABC Action News. And I was just a big old goofball back then. And I certainly wasn't very smart. I was just, in high school to have a whole lot of fun. But the meteorologist at the TV station said that I kind of had a knack, the gift to gab. That's me, I'm a talker. And he said, I had quite a personality. So if I had some brains to go with that, then I could certainly do something with my weather career. The way that I read a weather map is a little bit different from how I learned to read a weather map. So a lot of times we don't really use them anymore. You don't see them, the big H's and the big L's and the cold fronts and the warm fronts. You don't really notice meteorologists drawing them on the maps anymore. You see those, the rain forecast, but the science behind it, people, unfortunately, they don't want to see it anymore. They just want to know, is it going to rain? What's going to happen? But to me, I always like to think about what happens behind the scenes. What are the inner workings? What if the computers didn't work? Would I be able to figure this out? And, I believe that the Girl Scouts use things like compasses and thermometers and, tools in their toolkit in order to forecast the weather. It's really a matter of the high pressure and low pressure. Have you ever looked up in the sky and noticed that the clouds are moving in different directions? Well, there's several inner workings with the forecast, and it starts out with the clouds. Okay. And so there's lower clouds and higher clouds, and the higher clouds, they are moving in a completely separate direction, but I need to know what's happening in all of the layers of the atmosphere. And that's because cold fronts and warm fronts start interacting with the atmosphere. And a meteorologist, they study these cold fronts and warm fronts specifically because a cold front is an area of cold air moving into a section of warmer air. And so on any given week in Alabama, we talk about there's a cold front coming, especially in the spring, because we get a series of warm days and we stay really warm until that cold front arrives. The cold front moves through and we see those temperatures moving down. And the same can be said for picking out any particular area of the country when you're trying to predict the weather yourself. Minneapolis, just in this particular example, they're right along that cold front talking about 30 degrees. And Tallahassee, Florida, where the warm front is, that's 70 degrees. And so the warm front is an area of warm air moving into an area of cooler air. And so how warm fronts impact us here in the Deep South is cold fronts will actually dive southward as cold fronts, stall out, and then lift back up as the warm front. And so these large air masses, they change, they progress, they retrograde, they move around. And water molecules are very buoyant. And so they, and that's another point that I brought out. This is a cool little, it's a special edition, another book. It talks about what happens during the water cycle. The evaporation, the condensation, and the precipitation. So very, very basic steps here. But it's really important to show those steps because it also shows the fact that water is in a gaseous state. And so it's really buoyant and it's constantly moving. And so checking the forecast on Monday for Friday's weather is the worst idea. If you wanted to get a forecast with at least a little bit of accuracy, 24 to 48 hours is your best. But high pressure and low pressure, you can sometimes feel it in the atmosphere, but you always will know whether or not you're going to see severe weather happen with how these cold fronts and warm fronts interact. And so if we see temperatures in the 80s one day and then temperatures in the 30s the next day, then you likely have a possibility of some severe weather. This is certainly something that's important to me to try to encourage people to, especially young ladies, to get more into the STEM career. When I was young, I would have encouraged, I didn't have somebody to tell me, hey, study hard, get good grades. So I had to really fight tooth and nail to get my bachelor's degree and then get my master's degree. And then my second education from Mississippi State University, to get that meteorology certificate. It's important to explain that if you work hard when you're in the fundamental stages of your life, the developmental stages won't be nearly as hard. And so I would encourage everyone to really just pay attention in school when you're young, because it will seem just a whole lot easier when you get into college. Those foundations, they are certainly built very, very young, and that time frame gets shorter and shorter each year. Practicing your math and science not just will open up a career field for meteorology and being able to use physics and math in order to see how tornadoes form and track the warm fronts and the cold fronts, but you can do anything with a career in science, technology, engineering, and math. And I think it's just really, really good, from one nerd to another to see that reinforcing shot that, the computer geeks shall prevail.